Now, that brain that you gave me, was it Hans Delbrück's?
No.
Ah, good. Would you mind telling me whose brain I did put in?
And you won't be angry?
I will not be angry.
Abby someone.
Abby someone. Abby who?
Abby Normal.
Abby Normal.
I'm almost sure that was the name.
There it is.
We out here doing it real style.
Okay, we just had an entire conversation about emo rap, and I guess kind of to an extent rap in general, and you come onto the show and the first thing you say is what?
Boom, we out here.
But then finish the sentence. Boom, we out here doing it. I think you said, I don't know. I can't
real
remember.
style or
that
something.
Sounds like the emo rap. It just feels like you're trying to get.
Yeah, that's as emo rap as I get based on.
I don't know if it counts.
Experiences with it.
I don't know that necessarily counts. I suppose, but it's just.
It was a sample. Okay.
What are you sampling? Go on.
Gibberish. It's just my normal life, just sampling gibberish.
That's fair. Speaking of sampling gibberish, welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. I am David. That guy's Aaron. Say hello, Aaron.
Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Thanks for checking us out.
There you go, assuming the gender of our listeners again. Although, if you look at the stats... No. If you look at the stats, that's very accurate. I get like updates from this website called Chartable, which kind of like tracks how the podcast is doing on the likes, basically on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I think are the two that it focuses on, and so you can like break down demographics. Now, obviously, this requires people to input information when they're signing up for. I'm assuming, I don't know if it's when they're signing up for their Spotify accounts and their Apple IDs. It must be. Because at some point in time they would put their gender specific information and their age and stuff, but it's very much just us, like not just us listening, but the like listening audience is basically dudes in their like, I think it's like 30 to 45 is like the demographic that it's like 98% of your listening audience is this, and I'm like, yeah, that seems about right.
I was gonna say I've never had a female message me yet saying she liked the show, so if you're out there, send us a message so we know we're not just
Aaron's
talking
doing
to everyone just like us.
Clearly, Aaron's doing this to pick up the ladies. If you're a lady out there listening,
I hope my mom or
my
my auntie or someone's listening. Come on.
It's funny because my wife, like a few weeks ago, was like, I should really listen to your podcast. And I'm like, why would you? It's like, it has like, I mean, sure, if you want to, but it has like nothing to do with you. Like, it's not geared for you in any way. Like, I'm not offended that you don't listen to my podcast. Like, I had a coworker the other day that said that basically he's like, we were just kind of like going back and forth, kind of, you know, being dicks to each other a little bit, like just for fun. Right. And he's like, yeah, well, I don't listen to your podcast. And I'm like, yeah, of course you don't. I don't make it for you. Like, you're not the guy I'm aiming at.
Right.
He's like, well, what do you mean? Cause I mean, we're similar in age and whatever. Like, do you tell me, Mike, what is your favorite music? Is it punk rock or is it country music? Oh, I like country music. Well, there's a thing here. We're not talking about any of that. So, I mean, you can listen if you want, but, you know, I'm not offended if you don't, because
right.
we have a very specific audience that we aim at. But that's cool. If you want to go ahead, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Growing Punk Pod. You can find our personal Twitters and Instagrams linked there as well. And we do now officially, I don't know how active I'll be on it. We do officially have a website now. I wish I could remember what the address was because I haven't purchased a domain name. Because I'm like, well, I don't want to pay for a domain name if I just end up being like, well, that was fun for 2 weeks. So you can find it in the links in all of my social media bios, all the show's social media bios. It's there. It's basically a place you can find all the podcasts there. There are some posts on there as well, like blog posts where it might be things that I'm just like, maybe I'll get Aaron to write eventually if he ever feels like it, but I'm not sure how literate he is.
The first entry will be on Emo Rap.
There you go, yeah. But I was going to say, yeah, like some of the posts that are on there, there's like supplemental sort of stuff to the episodes sometimes. If, I mention something, or if you're like, what is that song that's playing? Like, there's things like that. What movie did that quote come from? You'll find that information there.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. And then like
I don't even know that sometimes. So
yeah, well, so I mean, the first kind of supplemental post for an episode is up there for our 4 Years Strong Set Your Goals episode, in which I list what the movie is from, like the clips are from, and that's kind of fun. I should say that, like, I know that's like one of the funnest things for me in producing the podcast is like finding movie clips and using them, and usually trying to tie them into the episode. Yeah. So I mean, if you can ever figure out what the connection is, you win some kind of prize, or you could just cheat and go to the website and find it there, I suppose. But and then like sometimes alternate artwork and stuff, because sometimes I get carried away. But yeah, so go find that on our social medias. Yeah, we're here. So we didn't mention last week at the end of the episode. I just blew right by it what we were going to talk about. So you know by the title of the episode, though, who we're talking about because you're listening to it. We're going to talk about Goldfinger, a band that has been around for a little while. So why don't you real quick, Aaron, because I think, if I remember, we were texting back and forth, and I think you kind of maybe suggested Goldfinger. I don't remember. It was like you brought it back around, so I don't remember who initially suggested it, but you brought it back around. So why don't you share a little bit about how you kind of got into Goldfinger when you first heard him, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, I think like there was a number, so after we wrapped up the Easy Core, we were trying to kind of going back and forth on what we should do next, and there's always so many different bands and subjects and stuff we could do, and so I was trying to think. And I mean, we've mentioned Goldfinger probably a handful of times over the last year, and yeah, and it's a band that I go back to fairly often enough and seems familiar, and so figured what better time than now to do it. And then as we discussed further, what that could lead into, and so anyways, we can mention that later on. But yeah, it just seemed like a good band to do. Yeah, they were a band that I missed the boat on. I don't really know why. They were just one of those bands that I guess I didn't have any friends that were into them, or it didn't really come up. I remember seeing like their albums in stores, and I knew they were a punk band. I remember seeing them play 99 Red Balloons on a talk show in the early 2000s. They were all dressed up in like rabbit uniforms and stuff, or costumes, like just something bizarre. So I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of weird. Yeah, it was fun enough, but it wasn't. I mean, that's a cover song too, so it just didn't really grab me, and so I guess I just never really went back to it until recently, like in the last handful of years or whatever. But
yeah, so you alluded to. I just wanted to touch on something real quick because you alluded to. We kind of came up with something that we're going to go to next, kind of launching from this, much like we did with Newfound Glory in the Easy Core series. I think it'd be fun if we kind of start doing that a little bit. So this is kind of like our second attempt. Whether or not we can continue kind of theming, episodes, we'll see. But we've definitely got the next couple laid out here, so that's cool. But for myself, I can specifically remember where, at least I think I can specifically remember where I heard Goldfinger. Maybe I heard them before this, but this is definitely, like, when I think about them, this is the first thought I have, is they were on the soundtrack for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And like, I absolutely like played that game. I can remember playing it at my cousin's place over Christmas one year. I think he may have possibly gotten the PlayStation and the game for Christmas one year, and so we just like played the crap out of it. And so like my cousin Darren is a guy who, like, I would hear about bands from him. We'd go to shows together and whatnot. Like, still when I see him, we don't live very close to each other. In fact, you probably live closer to him than I do. But yeah, but we'll chat about bands and shows and stuff. Still semi-regularly when we see each other for family things. But yeah, I can remember playing that game and that song. I'm trying to think if I can remember any other songs off of that soundtrack. There were some good songs on there for sure, but that Superman was the song that was on there. And anytime I hear that song, I'm immediately like, oh, Downhill Jam, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, here we go. Like,
nice.
100% every time. And the funny thing is I actually picked one of the albums we're going to do because in my brain I was thinking Superman was on that album, but it's not. It's on the album Hang Ups, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So spoiler alert, if you couldn't figure it out from, artwork and stuff like that, and if we've said anything, we're not doing Hang Ups. So this is about the only time we'll talk about, I was going to say about Goldfinger, about Superman in particular. But that's on a different album. And I was like, oh, but I think one of the albums we picked is for sure better, in my mind anyway. But yeah, so Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, every time I hear that song, and it's still like, it came on. We were at an Edmonton Oilers hockey game just last night, and all of a sudden it came on, and I was like,
really?
"Yes, yeah,
wow.
yeah!" And it still comes on, and I turned to my wife. Speaking of her in the podcast, I was like, "Oh, this is the band we're doing the next episode on." And she's like, "Huh?" But I was like, "Whatever."
That's so random. I would never guess a band like that would be played at a hockey game.
Yeah,
I can't picture that song. Like, I don't know if it's some like anthemic, catchy song that they'd play there or what.
Right. It's just, it's got it like what's the word I'm looking for? Just like an iconic, I suppose, a signature like intro. That's just like with that, like the snare, like there's like a snare little roll thing that happens, and straight into just like that upstroke ska guitar. Oh. And it's just like, I'm going to guess, I'm sure I could find this out, and I may try to do this while guessing, but I'm going to guess it was their highest charting song. It has to be like, but
of all time.
Yeah, that's, I don't know how many songs they had that charted. Let's see.
Yeah, I guess.
And so Hang Ups, 1997. So it came out a year after, I'm kind of giving away a little bit here, but a year after one of the albums we're going to talk about. But let's see if I can, where are you, Superman? It's the first track. I was hoping there was a link there. There's not even like information on,
okay.
on the Wikipedia for it. But, I don't know. It's a classic though. But as I mentioned, we're not talking about that album. So, but I'd say they're one of those bands for me, 90s punk, that I can remember loving and really enjoying the music of. I don't think I ever saw them live, I don't believe I ever owned a CD of theirs, or even a cassette, like anything. Like I think I burned their albums, maybe the first two albums at some point in time. I want to say they're one of the first bands I can remember going on to like mp3.com and searching up and downloading music from.
Yeah.
So I always loved them. Never really owned anything by them. And when I put the album we're going to talk about first on, I was like, oh, I know like all of this album. So at some point in time, it was in some way, shape, or form in our collection. Or my collection. So let's do it. First and foremost, with Goldfinger, we are going to talk about their debut album. It is simply self-titled. So let's go. First, I got to ask you, what do you think of that drum sound?
Let's see. First note. The snare stands out as hard to listen to.
You know what it reminds me of? Every time I hear it, do you know what thunder sticks are? Like, I don't know if that's a specific brand thing or if that's like actually like a descriptive.
Is that like where they've got like a bunch of little like raw, like it's kind of a softer?
No, so like thunder sticks are these things that I can remember getting them at like sporting events. They're like these inflatable like plastic tubes.
Oh yeah.
And you bang them together.
Yeah.
And the whole So the snare drum reminds me of someone just banging those together. It's unbelievably like, I don't know if it's good or bad. Like you get used to it, you adjust to it. It's not like a snare sound that jumps out to me like, the super like gated snare you'd hear from like 80s like hair metal sort of stuff where I'm just like that. I can't listen to that. That's terrible. But like this snare, I'm like, okay, I do eventually adjust to it.
Yeah. And it does, it fits the style enough, like with punk ska, like just that really tight, like usually they'll have like a smaller snare. It's not as deep because they want that like higher pingy sound to it. But this one was, like you said, you get used to it, but it's always weird when you put an album on for the first time and something all of a sudden is like, whoa, what is that?
Right.
It just kind of then throws off the rest of how you hear the album.
Right. Well, and this definitely won't be, it'll be the first time, but not the last time we mention Blink-182 on this episode, for various reasons. But I'm curious because, like, when Travis Barker with Enema of the State, when it came out, I remember, like, that snare sound, all of a sudden everyone was talking about it because it was like this high, like, super tight snare sound, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, yeah, and I mean, this definitely doesn't sound as crisp and clean as Travis Barker's did.
Right.
But I'm kind of wondering a little bit. I'm like, okay, like, I didn't really notice it until Enema of the State, and maybe if I went back and listened more, maybe I'd notice it on other records. But I'm like, is this like maybe the precursor to that sound of, I mean, maybe it was another band was doing it before, because I think it does come through maybe a little more, especially in like ska bands.
Yeah.
Like that tighter snare.
Yeah, and it reminded me actually of No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom.
Right.
Because there's a similar sound. So it definitely goes with that punk ska reggae kind of feel. And I think it's just partially the production of it. Like, I mean, it's okay to have a snare sound like that if you're, I don't know, if you're like compressing it or something or miking it differently. But when you get so much of that like ring every time, it just kind of cuts through the rest. And
it's funny because there have definitely been albums and bands that have gone for that sound, and like you mentioned, like when that ring really cuts through, or if it's just mixed poorly, it doesn't work. I do think on this record it does work because at least for myself, I'm able to get used to it, and it is like a signature sound. I'd be interested to go back through more of the Goldfinger library, because I mean, on the other album we're going to talk about, that's not a thing, which is funny.
Right.
Because Travis Barker drums on it. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about their latest, well, I guess they had a Christmas EP, but their latest full length as well. So it's funny because, Travis Barker drums on that, and it doesn't have that super high pingy sound. But again, you get used to it. It's fine. Whatever. I'll put up with it.
Yeah, it didn't. I remember thinking that when I started it, but by the end of it, I just enjoyed the album enough that I didn't really think about
exactly,
that. So.
Right? Like, and maybe that's a testament to John Feldman and Goldfinger's songwriting abilities to just write good songs that you don't have to get hung up on things like production, because sometimes that can be a distraction. And in this case, I don't think, outside of like that first song kicking off, I don't think it was that big of a distraction.
Yeah.
Because well, welcome to the show. But yeah, so I mean, I did want to point something out real quick before we kind of get into focusing on some songs. One of the last tracks on the album is not a song at all. It's called Phone Conversation. It's literally a phone conversation.
Right.
But in it, he talks about this band, and I'm assuming, if I have to think back to the conversation, I'm assuming the whole thing is just like made up, right? Not that it was an actual phone conversation, but it was just two guys, kind of doing a little skit thing, because that was a thing that bands did at one point in time. But he mentions a band called Abby Normal, and I was like, why does that sound so familiar? And so I searched it up, and first, like, what they're referencing is Abby Normal comes from the movie Young Frankenstein, which I don't believe I've ever seen, but when I looked it up, that's what comes up as Young Frankenstein. But then as I was like looking it up, I was like realizing like, oh, you know what it is? One of my favorite bands of all time, Moving Mountains, released like a split EP with the band Prawn. And the first track on that by Moving Mountains is called Abby Normal. And I was like, I had no idea where it came from then. But when he said it on this album, I was like, why does that sound so familiar? So, put it together. But we're clearly not going to talk about Phone Conversation, and we're not going to talk about Abby Normal by Moving Mountains. First song we're going to talk about is Here in Your Bedroom. So I picked the 3 songs on this record. You picked the 3 songs on the other record.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe I'll start with Here in Your Bedroom. It wasn't the first song of theirs I heard. It was probably the second song of theirs I heard, I'm sure. And it was that guitar, like that lead guitar riff off the beginning, I've always loved. And how it's just kind of comes into this bit of a mellow ska vibe. And then, I mean, as a teenager, I always laughed at the lines, what is it? He just talks about being on top and whatever. I'm like, I think he's singing about sex, right? Like, I mean, the song itself, I don't think is entirely about sex. Like, I think he's lyrically just talking about being, you know, when he's with her, he can forget kind of the world and the problems that he's facing and whatever. And it's just like an escape for him or whatever. But what I found interesting about this song is that lyrically, I was always under the assumption that the chorus went like this: when I wake up tomorrow, will you still feel the same? When I wake up tomorrow, well, you have changed. But it's will you have changed, because the way I took it, like just that, like basically like flipping of one letter, well, comma, you have changed, would lead me to think like, oh, he still loves her, but she doesn't love him, sort of thing. Yeah. Instead, he's just asking, you know, will you have changed? Are you still going to feel the same tomorrow? Because I know I'm going to feel the same. Will you? Like, so it's, you know, it's still not, you know, sure and certain, but it's definitely a little more optimistic, I suppose, than being like, oh, you've changed. You don't love me anymore. But here I am in your bedroom still wanting to be here, sort of deal, right? But so had you listened to this record before prepping for this episode?
I mean, I've heard bits and pieces of it over the years, but I can't remember ever sitting down and listening to it from start to finish.
Yeah.
And there was, you know, I found myself a lot with this album thinking like, oh, that's kind of weird or a little odd, or not for any major reason. I can't even really pinpoint it. I think it's just is John Feldman's, just his charisma, the way he sings and writes songs, like it's just a bit more unique. But I think that's what stands out to me about them, or what makes them stand out. I mean, is John Feldman. I mean, he's a very gifted songwriter and singer, and you can just kind of hear his, you know, he's super energetic. I think he's probably in his 50s now, and even just when I see videos of him live now, like he's just jumping around, and when I've listened to him on podcasts, you know, he just has that kind of fire inside of him. And so even though this album is, you know, 20 plus years old, I can just hear that in him. And it makes it a unique listen. It wasn't in a negative way by any means. Yeah.
It's interesting because two notes. One, you mentioned the way he sings, and I just wanted to point out before I forget, but the way Feldman sings at the beginning of this song actually kind of in a weird way reminds me of Elliott Smith, who's, I mean, his vocal delivery was a lot softer and whatever, and Feldman kind of starts the song singing a little softer. But to go into what you're saying about, you know, like his energy and playing live, I would definitely say that I watched, or I didn't finish it, but I was watching, they did a release for, do you remember the DVD series, The Show Must Go Off?
I don't think so.
So it was a DVD series of live like punk shows, right? And so,
oh, cool.
So Goldfinger did one, which I was watching. The only one I owned was Alkaline Trio. They did one.
Well, right
but anyway, this Goldfinger one I was watching. I hope I'm going to bring something up in a little bit here too. But as I was watching it, I was kind of going, okay, Feldman clearly sacrifices vocal quality and delivery for energy, because as you mentioned, like he's all over the place, jumping around and having a good time, but listening to him sing, at least on that DVD, is like almost painful. It's not a problem of being on or off key, like he's singing fine, but he's just constantly like away from the mic, out of breath, and just like kind of it's very choppy sort of deal. And I mean, to watch them though, it's live and he's got all sorts of energy, so it's kind of cool. But yeah, when you pointed that out, like this video for this song, I don't know if you watched it, but it's kind of their iconic video where they're like just playing in this small room or whatever. And like half of it, they're all dressed in suits. And the other half, because I mean, they're a ska band, so they have to be. And the other half, they're like, he's wearing like a blue Hawaiian shirt or whatever, but they're just like going crazy. And there's like these two girls dancing right up in front of the mic, like just kind of doing this weird sort of shuffle thing that I'm like, it's so 90s.
I'll have to go back and watch it.
But. Yeah, go watch it. It is very 90s, but it's when I think of Goldfinger, like that video comes to mind, because I'm like, yeah, there's nothing crazy in it, but it's just a very specific style and look, and it's really good. But he's definitely all over the place with that energy.
Yeah, that was, as I was listening to this album, I think I always just thought they were just a straight punk band. I don't.
Right.
I mean, obviously, I've listened to their new album, which has, you know, a lot of ska and reggae influence, and maybe I didn't realize that went all the way back to the beginning.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think, like, I know I was watching a video from one of the songs off the new record or latest record. Now it's a few years old. But they were talking about, like, someone on the YouTube section was talking about, like, oh, I'm so glad they brought the ska back. So I'm not sure if they, like, got away from that for an entire album or not. Like, I know some of their singles definitely weren't ska, but, like, at the same point, like, their bigger songs, I'm like, yeah, they were all ska. Or, like, maybe not necessarily with the horn section. I'm trying to think if there's a horn section on this song or if it's just, like, the upstroke guitar that's going on and kind of the bounciness. But yeah, no, they always definitely had a ska vibe going on, and it was fairly consistent. Like, it's funny because I don't know that they have ever officially had a horn section in the band. I think I've seen performances. Yeah, I think I've seen performances though where there are people playing horns. So it's interesting, like, how much they include that, because I don't know if they, like, the Show Must Go Off that I was watching, I don't think they had a horn section out there at all. And I'm trying to remember if I heard the horn section playing, or because I think I was watching another video, a live video from one of the songs we're going to do off the newer album. And there was, like, I thought at first someone was playing horns, but it was, like, literally a camera guy that was kind of dancing and, like, holding a camera. And at first I thought he was playing a horn. I'm like, no, he's not. So I don't know. They could be playing to tracks for all I know. But I didn't pay close enough attention. But yeah, that was the one thing that always stood out to me about Goldfinger, is they were, like, one of those ska punk bands, but I think they were always more polished than maybe some of their contemporaries in that sound. And which I think would kind of pave the way a bit for what Feldman would do in the future, as far as just, like, that polished connection or whatever. But so yeah, Here in Your Bedroom has always been a song that I've loved, that hooked me on Goldfinger. But we're going to move into another song that I specifically remember going to mp3.com probably and listening to. Maybe that's the first place I heard it. We're going to talk about Mabel. My first note is it's a classic 90s pop punk song. Definitely. Like, it's 90s. It's got a video for it too, which is kind of fun, but you should go back and watch these if you didn't see it.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Yeah, well, that's what one of the notes I have too, is it makes me think of a lot of other bands from that era, which which is a good thing. I love that era. Yeah. And especially with this song, I was listening, I was like, man, there's some parts in this that just remind me of another band, and I can't think specifically of what it is. And then it later came to me, the band Goaty Hook. And I don't know if it's just like one of the guitar parts or even the guitar tone. It was just something. I was like, this is reminding me of that whole era, but a specific band. And then it was like, so I was like, oh, I wonder what. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, those bands would have been around, similar times. So I don't know if it was just a guitar sound or just something simple, but it just kind of got stuck in my head until I could think of the band, and I was like,
is it maybe just like the kind of half cheesy lyrics that this song has?
Well, yeah,
Goaty Hook definitely had some cheesy lyrics, so maybe that's the connection.
Yeah, that could definitely be part of it too.
And I've like this song. I feel like, and maybe this isn't just a Goldfinger thing, but when I think about this kind of sort of composing idea, it reminds me of Goldfinger, in just how a song starts one way, and then, like, the back third of the song, they all of a sudden just go double time like kick it in. Because they do this on this song, they do it on another song that we talk about on the newer record, where it just, like, it starts out doing one thing, and then all of a sudden the back half, like, it just takes a turn. Or I don't know if it's back half, back third. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And I also, what I love about this song in particular, when they do that, is the whole vibe of the song changes, obviously sonically, but lyrically as well, because it happens in that, I guess, third verse or whatever, when he starts talking about Mabel going out with Charlie, like, so all of a sudden she's like left him, and so it, like, kind of takes a bit of an angrier, angstier sound through that, and then through the chorus where they change the lyrics from what they were in the first half of the song to kind of like a reworking, but so because it originally goes, she makes me want to kiss all the babies, hug the puppy dog. She makes me feel. It says she makes me feel like a mom. I don't know what that line is supposed to mean. That's weird. I mean, I'm assuming he's like, he feels loved by his mom, and like, I'm not sure if he's like feeling like he's a mom. Like, that's weird. I think it's like, she loves me, she's taking care of me, sort of thing. That's the vibe I get. And it says, smell the flowers and plant a tree. I gotta say that Mabel, she's the bomb. Now the funny thing is there any women named Mabel that aren't, like, in their 80s? That's my question. But
she'd be in her 80s now.
That's fair, maybe. But then the lyric changes from like hug the babies and the puppy dogs to rabies got the puppy dogs and now I really need my mom. I bought her flowers, so woe is me. It sucks. I still think Mabel, she's the bomb. So I just love how it like changes, and they use like, you know, obviously the rhyming scheme of saying the word babies, he changes it to rabies, and instead of hugging babies and puppy dogs, well, now rabies got the dogs. So it's like yeah, it's just like this interesting kind of like flipping of the switch. Of course, it's also, I mean, obviously those lyrics are cheesy. I mean, it doesn't, the whole song was kind of cheesy because, you know, there's, I mentioned earlier, wouldn't be the first time we mentioned Blink. I'm going to mention them again because there's that whole line with the whole like Charlie's package looking like a tube of cookie dough. Like, and the drummer sings in like a high pitched voice. That looks like a tube of cookie dough, like sort of thing. It's like, it's kind of, it's just silly. And there's a whole sketch on there about, you know, like his breaths, like it's not in that song. It might come right after or right before. But a whole like little skit thing about like his breath smelling, and he's like, "Come on, man, we've cuddled," and like just going on about trying to convince him to smell his breath, and it's like it's very just reminds me of like the little skits on like Dude Ranch by Blink-182, right?
Right.
But, or they're like Mark, Tom, and Travis show, like back and forth sort of thing that they do. But yeah, it's just like it's so much fun. This song, like it comes on, I'm like, "Yep, I'm." It's just going to put a smile on my face every time.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those songs that I would go back to on the album if, you know, if I wasn't going to listen to the whole thing, I would go back to some. That would definitely be one of them. Yeah,
and yeah, no, I don't know. It's just I'm pretty sure it was one of those MP3.com songs that I like went in the early days of downloading MP3s and went and found, and it's lumped in there with like, for me, discovering like the Get Up Kids. Goldfinger. There's just like a few bands that were like,
for sure.
You know, maybe they weren't fully on, you know, they weren't like obviously like the Pennywises and the NoFXs and, you know, like those bands that were just staples.
Right.
I think they're always, for me, they're always kind of a little bit on the outside of being like, they were definitely well accepted, I think, as far as like, you know, you didn't have people going like, "Oh man, Goldfinger's not punk." At least I don't recall ever hearing that, where you'd hear that about, you know, "Oh, Blink's not punk," or
right.
You know,
yeah.
And I'm not here to argue that, but it was just like one of those bands where I feel like, you know, when I think about the kids in my high school who listened to punk, who were like the gatekeepers or whatever, I think they were okay with them, maybe because they would overlook the poppiness because of the ska sort of thing. Like ska's just happy and bouncy anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So. But.
Well, I don't remember people talking about them at all for good or bad. So maybe it's just because I was from a small town, and
I was from a small town.
I was one of the ones that knew probably more bands than most. So I guess if I didn't know them, then others didn't. So
how actually this brings a question that has nothing to do with Goldfinger, but how big when you were growing up? How big was Dauphin, Manitoba?
It was like 8,000 or 9,000 people.
So it was bigger than the town that I grew up in, and I was still connected. What is your problem?
Well, I mean, yeah, I didn't have. I had internet, and it was. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
How far were you from Winnipeg? Would that be the closest city?
Yeah, well, it's the same. It was 3.5 to Winnipeg or 3.5 to Regina.
Okay.
So
yeah, okay, so that's a big thing. I was in a town of about 5,000 people when I was growing up, but we were like 25 minutes from Calgary. So like I went to shows in the Calgary scene. Like when I was in high school, I'd go to, you know, like local punk shows and whatever.
Yeah, we would go into Regina. I don't think we ever went to Winnipeg.
Yeah,
like we came and saw like bands like Good Riddance and Face to Face.
Yeah,
maybe it was just like I don't remember ever seeing Goldfinger like coming around. I just didn't see their name. I didn't play video games, so I wouldn't have seen it on Tony Hawk. I don't know. I'm sure it was around, and I did hear it. I probably just didn't know what it was. And
what kind of life did you lead? No internet, no video games, no Goldfinger.
I played music.
That's fair.
And, I don't know. Watched music videos on VHS.
That's fair.
Yeah. I'm sure. Like there was internet. Like I remember, like one of my best friends in high school. I could go over at his place. And he had internet, but he was just always kind of chatting. I don't remember like downloading music being a thing. It was still CDs.
Yeah, like I mean, it wasn't. I don't think it was a thing to the point at that time where I was like burning CDs. I don't know that CD burners were a regular thing because I can remember. I think the first CD that I had burned, like and I got someone to burn it was Millencolin and Pennybridge Pioneers. So that would have been in the early 2000s. But I can definitely remember going to mp3.com and just having like a few songs on my computer because it would take forever to download them. Right. Like, so, but just being like, oh, Goldfinger and Mabel is like one, like that's a memory that comes to mind is like opening up Winamp, which I don't know if you ever had Winamp, but it was just like opening up Winamp for things I had downloaded off of mp3.com. And I want to say scour.net maybe was like another website that is jumping to mind for music, and Mabel was definitely one that I downloaded. But, and so going back to that, The Show Must Go Off that I was watching. So it's from like House of Blues, Anaheim or whatever. When they play the song Mabel, it's amazing because they're like, it's like the middle of the set. So it's not like a big finish or anything. It's just the middle of the set. And John Feldman grabs the mic. I don't think he's not playing guitar on this song because some songs he just puts it down. And he's like, this song, you guys need to come up here and help me sing. And so it's not like he's calling everyone to the front. He is calling everyone onto the stage to the point. Yeah. To the point where it's like this, like there's hardly room for the members of the band. Like they're just surrounded and sing, like people are singing along. It's super rad. That was that was the last point I got to in the show before, I kind of had to move on and do other things. So I'd like to go back and finish it. Cause I'm like, if that's midway through the show, how do they end the set?
Yeah, no kidding.
Because it's going to be downhill from there. But
yeah, I was going to say too. With most of the bands I listened to were either on Tooth and Nail, Fat Records, or Epitaph, and because Goldfinger wasn't on there, they weren't on. They weren't.
I didn't even look to see what they were on.
I think they were probably already on a major label by then. I don't know if they just went straight to a major, but
Mojo Records. Mojo was a California-based record label founded in 95 by Jay Rifkin. It became a joint venture with Universal Music Group in 96. So, I guess technically it was a major label by then.
Right.
The label has been largely inactive since 2001. Let's see who some of the other artists were on this label. Yeah.
So, that would have been a huge reason why they just weren't on my radar because I didn't know.
Oh, okay. Wait, hold on. Mojo Records. Okay, so here's a who's who of artists. I wish it doesn't list some of the albums, so maybe they were on. But Cherry Poppin' Daddies, they were on there, which fits. Do you remember them? They were like a swing band.
What was it called?
The Cherry Poppin' Daddies. They wore like pinched. I think did they do Zoot Suit Riot? I think Zoot Suit Riot.
Yeah, I remember that song.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Also listed on here is Limp Bizkit. But it doesn't list any of their albums, so I don't know if it was just like early on or something.
You're right.
Real Big Fish, and then that's it. Well, there's other artists, but those are the only ones I know. It's just funny that it's like Goldfinger, Real Big Fish, and like Limp Bizkit is in there. Go figure. But it is funny that I just like that your reason for not knowing who they were was because they were on a major label that they had much better distribution.
I wouldn't but I wouldn't have. Again, that wouldn't have been on my radar. I would never have thought of picking up an album that wasn't on a label I knew. Like, I wouldn't have even considered that.
That's funny. Yeah, because I'm trying to, I definitely, along those lines, I definitely looked up labels, but I don't think I ever, bought things specifically because of the label. I think maybe, it was probably a lot of the bands, like you mentioned, Tooth and Nail would have been one because, just going into Christian bookstores, it's like if you had no idea who the artist was and you saw Tooth and Nail on the back, you might have somewhat of an idea. And whether you just straight up bought it or you went to one of the listening stations and kind of gave it a listen. But, going in and buying, Fat Wreck and Epitaph and stuff like that, I'm wondering if I would have, just been oh, this has Fat Wreck on the back, I'll buy it or whatever. I was just more of a guy. I would go to the section because I don't know about the music store you went to, but I can remember going to music and they'd have a punk section, right? And I would just go through. And if I wasn't looking for something in particular, there were a number of times where I grabbed something based off of the album artwork.
Yeah.
And sometimes that failed you. Sometimes it introduced you to great things, but
and I will say I do remember seeing this artwork. I don't know what year it would have been, but I can distinctly remember seeing it and then I probably turned it over and was like, oh, I don't know the label, or I don't really know this band, and so I'll just kind of leave it. If nobody else talks about it, then I'm assuming it's no good. But
yeah, that's fair. So let's move on to, I guess, the last song that we're going to focus on from Goldfinger's self-titled album. It's Nothing to Prove. This song always stood out to me because, I mean, it's energetic. You know, it's not the only just straight up fast song on the record by any means, but I think it's not the only like angry, angsty song on the record, but it's an interesting kind of comparison to the other two songs that we just talked about, because I think it's also a song lyrically dealing with a relationship. And, you know, like while Here in Your Bedroom seems like everything's kind of new and fresh and fun and fine, Mabel obviously has, and who knows, maybe this is all about the same girl. I don't know. But Mabel obviously starts good and then has the turn, right? Like as Mabel goes out with Charlie and then that relationship is clearly over.
Yeah.
But this song, his voice is a little rougher. Like he's definitely singing different from those other songs. And I think like with those other songs being, they're kind of approached a little lighter in the lyrical content. Whereas this one definitely hits a little harder, I think. And the best I can get out of it, it's about a relationship where Feldman, you know, maybe feels like he's not, you know, he's an unintentional screw up sort of thing, keeps letting this girl down, but at the same point, and he's kind of feeling, I don't know if he's feeling self-loathing, like I don't have to prove anything to you, but at the same point, I actually want to prove myself to you. Like it's this whole thing.
Right.
And the whole last verse kind of throws me off a little bit, where someone's drunk. I think she's drunk and she slapped him, and I don't know what's happening in this song. And then like when she comes home drunk at 3 a.m, he's like, oh, well, here we are back in bed again, 'cause I'm dumb. Right. Like I don't, it sounds like a rocky relationship.
Yeah. Well, on a different note, this song, not only does the title have a similar title or the same as an H2O song, but the intro of the song reminded me of H2O as well, or vice versa, as this came out before H2O. But I kind of double taked. I was like, is he saying Nothing to Prove? Because there's an H2O song called that, and I was like, because this kind of sounds like it. And so, anyways, but now. Yeah, good song. But yeah, I've got to. It's kind of that, you know, kind of typical angsty punk song, and
it definitely. Towards the back end of the record, it definitely takes on a whole new side of Goldfinger, I think, which, if I look at the track listing, I don't think this is like necessarily the first of the angsty songs. No, it's not, because like one that definitely stands out.
Yeah, there's lots of them.
Like, The City with Two Faces and stuff like that, right? Like, just taking on even like where it doesn't necessarily sound like John Feldman's singing.
Right.
He doesn't sound quite as nice. He always had a very unique voice. I don't know how to describe his voice either. Because he doesn't have, like, I don't think he has a nasal, like, snotty sort of voice that people kind of, like, put with punk rock. But at the same point, he definitely has, like, attitude and an edge to his voice. But
and I think that's, like, what I said at the beginning with, it stands out in a different way. And I think that goes to it as well. There's just something unique about him. And
yeah. Just end of sentence.
I was gonna. Anyways, just leave that thought. But
I feel
was,
like I want to push you a little bit. Like you were gonna say something.
I can't. I'm kind of looking at my notes here, and so I'm kind of going all over the place. But yeah, there was a number of times, like, so you'd send a few other songs you might touch on. I don't know if you still thought of that or not, but there was a few of those that. There was one part in the song King. Was it King for a Day or something?
Yeah.
I couldn't help but think that it reminded me of the Supertones. It was just kind of the horns and just kind of the, I don't know, whatever vibe was going on at the beginning. But I like that song. It's a cool concept to think. What would you do if you were king for a day?
Well, and King for a Day is another song that I think I mentioned earlier, just as far as like composition is concerned, where it starts one way and then at the back part of the song, it kicks it up and goes again, right? So I'm like, it's kind of this Goldfinger little thing that they do. And it's funny because, it like takes on that first chunk, whether it's 2/3 or whatever. I mean, I never looked at the time to see exactly, but where it's like this like the note I have is like a nice laid back summer ska jam, right? Like, you know, maybe leaning a little more on the reggae side and whatnot, but it's really good. Another song that I wanted to mention real quickly was actually The City with Two Faces, which is, you know, like I said, punk rock angst.
Yeah, it's a ripping tune.
I like the part where it like breaks down and he's like, you know, you may say there's some good bands that came from LA, like No Effects, which is actually from, I believe, the Bay Area, not LA.
Right.
Which is funny. He's like, Bad Religion. I was like, why did he say it like that? But also, weird, I'm sure. I guess, but also, this song is the first of, and maybe it gets referenced more times, but the first of 2 references in this episode to Bad Brains, because in this song, he drops a line about, you know, like last year it was Led Zeppelin, this year it's Bad Brains sort of thing, like basically talking about people who are just sort of going with whatever,
right,
you know, is scene worthy at the time, I guess. And so, yeah, because there's a song we're going to talk about coming up in a few minutes here on the Knife that he mentions Bad Brains in it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Playing Bad Brains.
Yeah. And then the last song that I kind of just wanted to briefly mention off of the self-titled album was My Girlfriend's Shower Sucks. Because it's another one of those songs where I'm like, oh, it just reminds me of Blink-182 in a way, just like being goofy and whatever. And he's like literally writing a song about crappy shower pressure or crappy water pressure. And it
which
actually
might be the most...
It might be what?
I was going to say, which might be the most relatable song lyrically I have on this album, because
your shower's
that's one
good?
thing. Like, no, my shower is good, but I hate going somewhere.
All right.
Like the shower head's too low, the pressure. Like, it's such a bummer. So it's just funny that they've got a song about his girlfriend's shower, and so he comes from the bedroom and straight to that crappy shower.
Yeah. And this is like one of those songs too that I can like specifically remember listening to at some point in time, being like, that's just silly. Like, so like sticking with me from those early days of me kind of first listening to Goldfinger. But I mean, kind of, you know, in conclusion with this record, I think it's, you know, it'll forever be a ska punk classic, if not just like a 90s punk rock classic. I mean, I don't know where it rates on, you know, your official lists and whatever. I air quoted for those listening who can't see. No one's watching except for you and I. You saw me air quote. But, you know, it's fun, it's feel good, but it's also full of angst. That's like everything I like about 90s punk. Like, it was, you know, sunshine, but also it wasn't sunshine because they were sometimes singing about some pretty heavy stuff, but it's just everything.
And I wish that I had have gotten into this earlier, because I think it would have been an album I would have listened to a lot. You know, there was a number of times on the album where I thought of a band, the Dingies as well, you know, just that mix of punk, ska, reggae, and, you know, I listened to that band a lot, and, you know, like I mentioned, Supertones, or just, you know, kind of all in that punk ska kind of realm, or Squad 5-0, whatever stuff I was listening to then. So I feel a little sad that I missed the boat on this, but never too late to go back to.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's a super easy. I said at one point during the week, I was like, man, I actually forgot how good this album is. Like, as I listened to it, right? Like in the back of my mind, I was always like, yeah, Goldfinger. You know, and maybe because I was confusing the self-titled record with Hang Ups. Maybe I need to go back to Hang Ups and see, like, is my opinion of Hang Ups even correct? But was always kind of like, yeah, it's all right. You know, it's got some good singles on it, and the rest of the album's kind of But as listening to this, I was just like, I could put this on and listen all the way through.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's a real easy listen, and it's good. So, it was fun to go back and revisit this one in my mp3.com days. But now we're going to move back to the future. That's not how that works, because it's now in the past anyway. But we're going to get a little newer. We're going to talk about the latest full length from Goldfinger. It's The Knife. So we decided it'd be kind of fun to do something where we looked at a band's first record, or at least, this was their first full length, but I mean, to lay out, I guess, one of their, if we do this going forward, it doesn't have to be the first, but one of their earlier records,
right? Yeah,
and then one of their later records. So we literally looked at their first record and now their latest full length. And this album gets a lot of flack, a ton of flack, for just sounding and being considered as, you know, it's like, oh, it's cast-offs from Blink-182's California. And California got a lot of flack So this album, I think, out of the gate, probably got some not like unjustified. I would say it's unjustified.
Yeah.
Criticism or just like, because I think there are definitely points on this album where, yes, I'm like, okay, I can see what people are saying. This sounds like it could be on Blink-182's California. And a lot of that was what, like, the flack that Blink-182 got for California was due to John Feldman having his hand in writing so many things, and like,
yeah, exactly.
You know, a lot of the woes and the nah, like just like overdoing things. And those show up on this record too, so I can see it. And obviously, production-wise, it sounds the same. Like,
yeah,
if you swap out, you could have swapped out. I think what they should have just done, Blink-182, back when they decided to replace Tom, should have just done what clearly they wanted to do and asked John Feldman to join the band.
Yeah, that
maybe
crazy.
I wonder if that would have been better. Like, I mean, we're not going to go down a road of Blink-182 here too far because eventually we will do an episode on them. But with like Matt Skiba joining the band, I remember like that original hype, like, okay, Blink's back, you know, they got that energy that Tom seemed to suck out of the band. And then like now I'm just like, Matt just seems like he doesn't have the energy for the most part, right? He's just kind of gotten into that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like what if John Feldman had joined Blink? You know?
Well, I think, I mean, I don't know if he could keep up with that kind of touring that they do, nor, I mean, have the time to do it because, you know, producing is his job. But that, it's definitely, that would be a pretty sweet match for sure.
Yeah, like, and when I hear this record, it just kind of makes me think. Like, I mean, I think I don't know if I'm in the majority or minority with this, but like I enjoy 9 more than California. Obviously, 9 is further. Like California felt like Blink trying to be Blink of old, whereas 9 feels anyway. So I don't know, you know, if they would have just kept going down that road or what. But we're not going to talk about it. We're here to talk about The Knife. That was just like a comparison out of the gate that I know a lot of people made, which is also fair because obviously Feldman worked with Blink, and also like Travis Barker is in the band at this point, at least on the album, because at this point Goldfinger is a super group. It's unbelievable because so Travis Barker playing drums. I don't know that he regularly, like when they play shows now, I don't think he plays.
Yeah, it's typically somebody else.
Yeah, well, in the video for Million Miles, is that what it, like whatever the opening track?
Yeah.
It's not Travis in the video. I don't know who it is. Some guy playing drums. But so Travis is in the band. Obviously, Mike Herrera of MXPX is on bass.
Yep.
And backing vocals. And in that Million Miles video, there's a line where he clearly like lip syncs, like sings it, but it's not him on the recording.
I'm not sure if he
weird.
did the recording too.
He did do the recording. That's the funny thing is he is on the recording, so I don't know what the deal is there. And then Philip Sneed, who used to play bass in Story of the Year, plays guitar in Goldfinger now. So it's literally just like grabbing bands from the late 90s, early 2000s that, you know, kind of struck big and said, hey, you want to come be in a ska punk band with me?
So to a few of those things you said, I mean, you know, you got to give credit to, you know, so both Blink and Goldfinger, they came up around the same time. So just in that comparison of the album sound like Blink, like they're similar all around. Like, yes, Goldfinger had the ska and reggae stuff, but, you know, they're also coming from the same world. You know, John worked with them writing, you know, so his writing is going to come off in the Goldfinger. And so, I don't know, I'm on the side that I loved Blink-182's California. And so that made me love this. Yeah, are some songs a bit similar? Sure. But I think, you know, there's only really the 2 songs I can think of on The Knife, basically the 2 fast songs that's like, okay, these sound like Blink. Otherwise, to me, the rest of the album has enough of its own sound that, you know, you can say that with so many bands of various eras, like, it's like, well, yeah, they're in similar worlds or influenced by similar things.
Well, and obviously, like the ska heavy songs aren't going to sound like Blink. Yeah, right? Like it's just not going to sound like them. But I think, I think the thing that really stands out though in that, and then we can maybe try and move on from the comparisons, is that I don't know that John Feldman writes like Mark Hoppus, right? And so like that writing influence really, and some of it felt like it was like things that he was just trying to emphasize that Blink did, right? Like you talk about the na-na-nas and the haze and whatever, like just those almost like more vocalizing things that really kind of popped up everywhere and still really do, like even on 9. But it was like that. I think he was such a part of the songwriting on California that it's hard for it not to sound like it on this. And then again, I don't know where, if they were both recorded in the same studio sort of thing, but him producing, and I'm assuming, I don't know if did he engineer, but anyway, like the guitar tones sound identical is what I'm getting at. The drums sound the same. Like they sound like albums that are meant to go together, which is fine. Again, like I didn't hate California. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I just like 9 more, but even then I'm not huge on 9. Right. But, so let's get into though, so we can stop maybe making the comparisons. Let's get into the first track that you picked, which is Get What I Need. And, why don't you talk about this one? Yeah,
man, this song is so good. To me, so I haven't extensively listened to Goldfinger's discography, but in the times that we have mentioned talking about them, I've gone back, listened through albums, and none of their albums have really stood out to me. So even the self-titled one, great album, but when I put it on, I'm not like, I need to listen to this. Whereas this whole album, like not exaggerating, I've easily listened to this album 10 to 15 times, if not 20 in the last couple of years. Because it's one of those albums I can just put on. It's easy to listen to. There's enough of, back and forth between fast and slower songs, and it's just such a great overall album. The production is top notch, like we mentioned. The players are amazing, and to me, this is Goldfinger at its best, which is kind of crazy with just their age, and but again that they can still write good songs that stand out to me. So Get What I Needed, just that perfect blend of punk ska to me. It's super catchy. It's a great. It doesn't open the album. It's the second track on the album, I believe. Yeah. And I love that it follows. I love that the first song just comes out blazing. Fast, classic. Skate song, and then this one follows it up really well by changing it up enough that it's like, okay, this album. Like you said, if you just listen to it from the beginning, you might think, oh, okay, this is just, going to be another Blink album or whatever. Right, yeah. And then this song, it's like, oh, okay, this is the Goldfinger that I know and remember from years past. And, I love the nostalgia that this song brings. I can't necessarily relate to the lyrics out of his perspective, out of his stories, but definitely can to just being... thinking back to that youthfulness, kind of maybe doing things that were a bit stupid, but, those were the things that made you kind of feel something or grow up or whatever it is, whether it was relationships or different circumstances. And so I just love that. It just takes me back to what made me love this music in the first place. Yeah. And I mean, first, I don't know if I agree in that, that this is Goldfinger at their best. I do I think this album is pretty good, but it's just it gets a little more overall, like a little more cardboard for me, I guess is. Yeah, and part of, like you mentioned, like the top notch production. It sounds great, but it's another one of those. I don't know if it's just these days that there's a certain guitar tone that's showing up on records, and I'm just like. What is this guitar tone? And it kind of shows up here where I'm like, it doesn't sound like it just, I don't know if it's like, it doesn't sound like you're recording from an amp. It just sounds like you're using a plug-in, which is very much what they could have been doing. And like another one, a record that I absolutely love that I have an issue with is Trash Boat, Crown Shyness. I'm like, the guitar tone on that, it just doesn't quite do it for me. But again, those songs are strong enough that I'm just like, I don't care. This record is amazing, right? As far as like, the lyrics of this song, I mean, obviously it doesn't relate specifically to my youth either, but that's because he's older than us, right? Like the picture that he's painting here is very much like when I don't know if you've ever watched any like 80s punk documentaries or even like movies, but like how a lot of times, because what are the lines here? He says, 30 years ago, since we smashed that window of that Northern California house. So 30 years ago would have at least been 1987, if not a bit earlier, because this came out in 2017. So I don't know when the song was specifically written, but a safety pin in my ear. We don't really
I don't know if people do safety pins a ton anymore. Maybe they
I
do.
did in like 2005.
That's amazing. And obviously, Bad Brains. I mean, at that time, Bad Brains was a super influential hardcore band.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Like, they're still influencing bands to this day, which is incredible. But what is he? Oh, spray paint on the walls. Like, the thing is, like, with that line, I don't know if he's talking about like actually just like graffiti, but spray, like, you know, like spray painting, vandalizing walls. The way I actually take that with everything else that comes before it is like when I asked about like watching any 80s punk documentaries or movies like SLC Punk and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where they're like living, like almost squatting in these houses, and there's
Right.
always spray paint on the walls, right? Like
Yeah.
whether it's like Ronnie Reagan and stuff like that, right? Like, speaking of the Dingies, obviously have a song where they reference Ronald Reagan, but
Okay.
yeah, and I mean that would have been years after it was necessary. I don't know why the Dingies did it, but anyway, so like I get that picture in this, and which is what I love about the first verse of this song. And just this song as a whole, like the kind of vibe I get from it is, I don't know. I feel like I could be wrong with this. But I feel like it's a little bit like Feldman talking about how, you know, maybe he abandoned his roots and his values to get where he is today, which is something he always wanted even back then. And I say that
Right.
because like Feldman is obviously, he's worked with even like pop stars, right? Like he's written for like Ashley Simpson and, you know, just like some pretty big pop stars of their time, and 5 Seconds of Summer and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And like part of me wonders, I'm like, is he referencing like doing that so that now he's in a place where he can legit just like make music that he loves?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's a cool contrast, right? The stories of what was going on when he was, you know, first getting into music, and now, you know, yeah, like you said, he's able to do what he wants.
Yeah.
But did he have to compromise? And I mean, as an artist, as a producer, you're gonna be put in spots where I don't want to say you don't want to be, but it's like, well, okay, this project comes up, I can pass this up. Is it exactly what I want to do? Maybe not, but it's going to help me further other projects that maybe I want to do. So it's not a negative thing, but it is a cool way to kind of put those two different, you know, times of his life together and kind of piece them together and how they work together.
Yeah. Well, because like the chorus just being like, I lost myself just to get what I want again. Like the lost myself part I take is like, I mean, when he's talking about listening to Bad Brains and with the safety pin in his ear and just like doing this, and there's another song where he references Dead Kennedys and Black Flag, I think.
Okay.
He also references The Who in that line, which I think is weird a little bit. That's the one where he's talking about, he's like, maybe I'm just a little left of what kids are listening to today, sort of deal. But I'm like, I mean, The Who is interesting to just briefly talk about that, because they're like a band that was obviously hugely successful making, you know, like rock songs. But I think like they do get, when you like go back and you like read books or documentaries or whatever on those early, like, you know, mid 70s punk days with like the Sex Pistols and the Clash and Ramones and stuff like that, especially like Sex Pistols and Clash, they talk about like, early influences of bands where they were just kind of like, what is this? Was like The Who, and like Roxy Music. It's just like The Who just being like, their guitars were a little louder, they were a little angstier or whatever. So like it feels weird for him in that other song to be referencing Black Flag and Dead Kennedys and The Who all together. I'm like, that's weird. But but you know, like talking about growing up listening to that hardcore music, hardcore punk music, and whatever other punk that came along with it. And then like he lost those values and those core that he, you know, kind of developed to go right for Ashley Simpson. And I'm trying to think who there were a couple just like major pop stars that I was like, interesting. But you know, at the same point through all that, he was also working with bands in the scene, and you know, he's just doing what he wants to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to go from that first verse talking about that, then the second verse to say things like, fade away in my head again, watch the days, the months, the years turn to rust. Skies are gray, will I be okay? Watch the memories I made turn to dust. Like he's like moving on from those things to kind of go and, you know, make a living for himself so that he can eventually do what he wants. Which is, it's again, I'm like kind of one of those people where I'm like, why can't musicians make a living doing what they want?
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
And I feel like
nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, and I feel like for the most part, we are at a place now where that's generally more accepted. That like, yeah, why not? Why can't an artist make money? I don't, you know, they may be a punk rock band, but they can go make some money. That's fine, right? Like, I don't know, or maybe I'm just not as connected to like that DIY underground punk sort of thing anymore, where that's still like a staple core value.
Yeah, maybe he had people like you said, like giving him flack for that, and he's like, hey,
for
like,
sure he did, yeah.
Yeah.
It's also
just part of it. So
it's also interesting because there's another song on the record where he says, "Don't call it a comeback. I've been here all along." Like, I think for sure he's heard criticism and that flack sent his way, right? And I think in some songs on this record, he's answering that and going like, "Look, I never went away. Like you can criticize me for working with these artists or what have you. This is still who I am, even if it looks a little bit different." But then there's other songs where it feels like he's feeling a little more like he's looking back going, maybe I got a little far for myself. Maybe I shouldn't have done that or whatever, right? Like, it's interesting. And that could just be me looking into it, knowing, like, again, the response people kind of give to John Feldman sometimes in the work he's done. But, I don't know. That's where it is.
Yeah, well, I think that leads well into the next song, and even over the overall theme of this album with the knife. Where he's talking about, just put the knife away and try to listen. And so maybe, back to that where he's like, how about you just take the time to ask me why I'm working with these bands or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And just try to listen to my side of things, and, instead of, maybe he's got his old punk friends hassling him, and he's like, hey, like, I need to provide for my family, and I need to do these. I can't be some crusty 50-year-old punk still, still living the dream, like, right? So it's, I mean, I love this song overall. It's, it's one of the few kind of straight up punk songs on the album. Yeah. So of course I love it, but yeah.
So with that, let's talk about Put the Knife Away. Here's something interesting I found about the song when I was looking up the lyrics on Genius.com. There's not a ton of like songs of theirs that have annotations, which is why I like going to Genius to like kind of read what people say. This song does actually have an annotation, which is interesting. But so specifically for the line, hold the knife away from me, right? The annotation says, this is not the first time John Feldman has lyrically used a knife to represent things getting tough in a relationship. On If I'm Not Right, which is the 5th track from the 2008 album Hello Destiny, he sings, hello, hello, hello again. Could you forgive my life? Because everything I said was wrong, so please remove the knife. And so it says, while a sorry Feldman makes this plea in the older tune, his words are rather imperative and bitter this time, as the title Put the Knife Away may imply. The album cover, however, shows a different portrait, which aligns itself more with the story told on If I'm Not Right, which is interesting because so there's the knife reference, right? And then on If I'm Not Right, he says, hello, could you forgive my life? Because everything I said was wrong. So the chorus on this song starts with "Always right, you're never wrong." Right. So I was like, there's some connections here, which I mean, maybe it's intentional and maybe it's not. Like, I don't know if the song is autobiographical for Feldman. If it is, and he's singing about the same relationship here, that's not very healthy because it doesn't sound like a healthy relationship at all. It doesn't sound like, some songs sound like they're written out of, let's call it like a lover's quarrel sort of thing, right? Like you're having a disagreement, an argument, a fight, whatever, but your foundations are still underlying and they're still, the relationship is still strong. This just sounds like potentially an abusive relationship, like not physically necessarily, but I'm not saying the knife is an actual thing, but like more like maybe emotionally abusive sort of thing. But I don't know. I just found that interesting that there was that connection between the two songs and, like 9 years separating them if it's about the same person.
Right. Yeah. But I like the symbolism, of a knife, whether it's, like you said, listen instead of cutting somebody down, take an opportunity to listen. Yeah. To me, it's a really intriguing like title for a record. Just the knife.
Just
That's
the
what
knife,
it's called, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but like you said, the cover art doesn't necessarily portray the same thing. So
yeah, well, because the apparently boy skeleton is holding flowers and the girl skeleton is holding the knife behind her back. But looking all sweet and innocent, right? Like, I mean, It is interesting because also like with that chorus where he's like, put the knife away, and or like that line, put the knife away and listen. It sounds like he's pleading, right? Like, again, not that the knife is a literal knife, right? Like,
right.
I don't think he's singing about a time someone actually holding a knife to him, but just like the way he repeats listen and listen, like it's just always like, listen, just listen, you know, don't do this. Just listen to me. Let me explain, or whatever the case may be. Right. But yeah, it's, I think this song is kind of like the formula for a punk rock sing along. If we want to talk about composition and writing, like how the verses are fast and then the chorus just kind of like cuts to halftime.
Right.
And it's like, all right, here we are, you know, like everyone sing along. You know, if it was a smaller show, everyone's, you know, like crowding the stage and their hands, their fingers are in the air pointing, whatever, singing along. Right. Like it's just, I think, written for that. And, another thing, I love how the first two verses are basically pretty much the same, but the third verse, the guitar riff comes in. It almost sounds more like a bridge, and maybe you could call it a bridge versus instead of it being a verse. I just know, like, if I'm like referencing Genius, they label it as verse 3, but like the guitar riff changes.
Yeah,
and
I
like,
love that
this
one.
sounds cool. Yeah. I really get behind it. The opening guitar riff reminds me of something that could be on an MXPX album, actually, because it's pretty simple and melodic. And
for sure.
Yeah. I don't know how much Mike Herrera has, you know, involvement in the writing process versus like whatever bass lines he's playing and maybe harmonies he's singing.
Right.
I don't know if he's playing any guitar riffs in any of these things, like as they're writing songs or not. But it is a pretty great song.
Yeah, and that riff and that bridge or verse, whatever. Yeah, at times it reminded me of Tom DeLonge's kind of, you know, just that kind of twangy. It's not like not a solo necessarily, but
no. Because as we've discussed over text messages, solos suck. No,
I don't know what I guess just like a lead line or something.
Yeah.
Like
it feels, if I'm thinking about it, because I didn't necessarily get the Tom DeLonge vibe from it like I do some other songs, like I've brought up obviously with Set Your Goals and then Truck Stop Blues by Newfound Glory and stuff like that. And maybe it sounds a little more angular and harsh than like Tom would write. Because Tom often described his guitar riffs as like nursery rhyme riffs, right? Like they're simple, they're sweet almost, where it's like, they're going to get stuck in your head because they're, you know, whereas this definitely felt a little more.
A bit more, yeah.
Yeah, but again, I could get what you're saying with like kind of, it's not a chunky riff. It's more definitely just kind of, as you kind of twangy, as you kind of said it.
Yeah, I don't know how
got
to,
that country twang, that Southern California country
not that,
twang.
It just like when you're kind of on one of the higher strings doing something, you know, just it's not a chunky riff, it's a twangy punk riff, whatever. Anyways.
Yeah, but and I mean, all in all, I really enjoy this song. Again, even if it gets a little formulaic with like the fast, slow, fast, or like fast halftime sort of thing, but it's real good. It's real good.
Yeah, and if every song on the album was like that, that would maybe be one thing. But because, like I said, there's only a few of them on there.
Yeah.
To me, when those come on, I'm like, oh yeah, I need this song right now.
Yeah. No, it's that's one thing you can definitely say about a Goldfinger record. I think is that there's a lot of variety without sounding, again, like it's like 15 different bands. Because that drives me crazy when you put a record on. It's one band, but every song sounds different, like a different band. I'm like, I want there to be some flow to an album and some cohesion and continuity. And Goldfinger does that really well. Like going, and I mean, it's not like they're bringing in a ton of different influences. They're basically going from fast punk songs to ska songs, right? Like, but it works.
Some of them will mix them up a bit, or
yeah.
It's not just like, you know, maybe it's a ska song but without horns, or some have some horn parts, and so
I like that. It's not the same from track 1 through to track 14 or however many are on here, right? But
I mean, I'm sure I would have been happy with that too, but no.
But let's get into the last one that we're gonna kind of dig into a little bit. It's Who's Laughing Now. I think this song is potentially the most controversial song on the record, potentially. I don't know how much you looked into this song, but this song was it's co-written by a guy by the name of Luke Hemmings. And I was like, who is Luke Hemmings? Luke Hemmings is in 5 Seconds of Summer. So a band that
that's
kind
too bad. I don't like this song anymore.
Let's say a band that kind of like obviously whether you think it's deserved. I mean, they're essentially a boy band that takes their main influences from pop punk songs, right? Like, which I've never really listened to them outside of maybe hearing songs out in the world, sort of thing.
Right.
So I can't really say much about 5 Seconds of Summer. I know that was like one of the big things that people would crap on Feldman for, was like, oh, you wrote for bands like 5 Seconds of Summer and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, whatever, like let them do their thing. Lyrically, I think it's interesting because I kind of get the vibe from this song that Feldman is answering his critics who have maybe called him out for working with pop acts in the past. So like, which is interesting because it's not the only song that he co-wrote on this record either with like a pop writer. See You Around was written with Martin Johnson, who has written for pop acts like Avril Lavigne and Elle King, right? Like, so there's some co-writes on this record that I think people were a little taken aback by. But I think, again, if we go back to Blink, like Blink has also co-written with some of those pop writers too, right? Like,
yeah, and those pop writers, I mean, there's a reason why they have so much success. Like, do I like the songs? Not really, but there must be something to them. So I think in the right circumstance, that their hand at helping write a song like this can make the song better. Like, I would have never listened to this song and be like, oh, this must be influenced by 5 Seconds of Summer. Like, I wouldn't have picked up on that. I mean, obviously, I love this song, which is why I picked it. Yeah, and so
I mean, well, with this song too, I think maybe it does sound the most different kind of for like melodically as far as the verse is concerned. Like when I hear this song, the verse melody stands out so much more, I think, than any other verse melody maybe on the record. And because it's a lot more like rhythmic, right? Like there's like it almost like rolls versus flows melodically. Like he's doing a lot of words in short amounts of time. Not that he's rapping, but he's just like kind of going through things, and it definitely feels more like maybe a radio pop song in that sense. But yeah, then the chorus gets like super bouncy, and I'm like, okay, yep, you got me again. I'm back. Yeah. I actually like to say that I like the verse. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like, oh, I'm back because I dislike the verses. It sounds like radio pop. Actually, the first note says I love the verse melody. It's very rhythmic. Like it's different from anything else I think on the record.
Yeah, and this song really stood out to me musically. I think Travis really brings kind of a technicality to ska drumming that isn't in a lot of ska bands. And I think he brings that through in this whole album, whether it's even the slower songs, just kind of the rim knocks he's doing on the snare. That's one reason why I love this album so much is, I know it's Travis, and so that plays into it too, but it just adds so much because typically ska or reggae drumming is fairly straightforward. There's no, crazy fills or off-time things. And so when he can add that flair to it in a way that's not overbearing, it just makes the song stand out so much more.
Yeah. That's definitely fair. And I mean, I had a note earlier. I think I may have missed it because I don't think it was on this song, but just about Travis's drumming in general. Like I don't necessarily love everything that Travis does because sometimes I think he does kind of overdo it a little bit.
Right.
But when he get like what you're saying here, I can totally get behind. And then when he goes into like just a straightforward like punk beat, I'm always like, man, like he's so good, right? Like
so
he knows when to do it to like drive the song, sort of thing.
Right. And I wonder what that vibe was like. As like I don't know if he had his hand in writing or if John had the songs and just said, here's the songs, Travis, play whatever you want. I wonder what that like communication was back and forth. If there were parts he was just like adding way too much in, or
I don't know. Be interesting to find out. The only other note I had on this song was I enjoy how Feldman is singing "This Is Not the End," and then
I was gonna say I love that
abruptly.
bridge. Yeah,
but like that's actually the end of the song. Right, like because he goes back to it because I think he does it in the bridge, and then he goes back to it saying like "This is not the end," and then the song ends. I just love like little things like that, right?
Well, that adds so much to the song because it's a bit heavier, a bit more aggressive, and just kind of changes the flow of the song. And that's really stood out to me. There was parts on this song that really reminded me actually of 5 Iron Frenzy. I think it was kind of at the beginning, just the the way the horns and the guitar are playing together, and so
there on one of these songs for sure on like the video, like the YouTube audio or whatever, someone had commented about Five Iron Frenzy.
Oh, okay.
So, so you're not alone. It may have been this one. If you're saying it, I'll say it was this one.
Yeah.
Some other songs that I just wanted to kind of quickly note on were Tijuana Sunrise.
Yeah, I love that song.
I was a little bummed you didn't pick it, to be honest, because I'm like,
it
anytime
was on
it comes
there,
on,
but yeah, I know it's.
Anytime it comes on, I'm just like, I just want to be drinking a beer on a hot summer day, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the fact that when he says Tijuana Sunrise, every time he says Tijuana, like I don't know if you picked up on that, but he definitely like says it with like, I mean, I guess probably the more proper pronunciation,
right?
Which I thought was pretty awesome. One of the first songs that jumped out to me on this record was Orthodontist Girl. Because it's a song.
That one's a bit much for me, but it actually reminds me, with that song Mabel and Girlfriend's Bedroom. He likes singing. So this song is about his wife. I remember seeing something about that, and it was kind of his like fetish song about his wife or whatever.
Which is funny because I'd assumed, I was like, maybe it's about his wife because it's very specific. But like, how could you not like? They're again. Much like Mabel, the lyrics are cheesy as hell. But come on, like with your mask on, your lips, they could be bigger, they could be smaller. I don't care at all, and I can't talk because the doctor's doing something in my mouth.
Yeah.
Like what? And then another line being, "Your hand in my mouth, holding that tiny vacuum thingy. I hope my tongue doesn't accidentally touch your fingers because that would be weird." Like, come on. The lyrics in that song. Come on.
Yeah. So, both that and Tijuana, both great songs, but it just didn't quite have enough to pull me back in and be like, this is the song I want. So.
I mean, Tijuana Sunrise, like that song, I think
it is a great song.
I feel like I'm trying to think if I went all the way through this record when it first came out. I definitely remember listening to it, but like if I did go all the way through, why I haven't gone back to Tijuana Sunrise just like in the summer as like this needs to be on. I mean, every summer I spend time at the beach on Vancouver Island. I'm like sitting out in the sun, in the sand. I'm like, why am I not listening to this? But I will be this year, thanks to this little episode. And I guess finally, which will tie this all in, because if Orthodontist Girl is about his wife, the last song I wanted to mention was Mila, which is about his daughter.
Right.
And it's just a sweet song and a great way to finish the album. Someone had commented on the video for Tijuana Sunrise about how they're like, John Feldman doesn't have friends, ... He just has family. As in, like, everyone who's a friend just becomes... And, like, that video, I don't know if you've seen the video for Tijuana Sunrise, but they're, like, hanging out around a camp, like a beach campfire sort of thing, singing songs, just having a good time. I'm like, it's great. Like, the song portrays that image, and then the video drives it home. So, I love that song. But, I mean, in conclusion, I think for this record, I'd say it may take some unwarranted criticism for being like, leftover tracks from California. Some of it does make sense, but I don't think people should write the record off for that.
Right. Yeah.
Because it does. I would say this is better than California. Right. Like I like California.
I really like that record.
So. It had some good songs on it, but I think all in all, as a record as a whole, I like this one I might say way more. Which is funny because I've definitely listened to California more than this one, but and maybe it's just my mood right now. I really enjoyed listening to this record.
Yeah, and I mean, this one came out shortly after California, and so had there been a bit more time in there, or like what would have happened if this one had come out first?
Exactly.
When everybody said, everything on California is leftover Goldfinger songs.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what I mean. You kind of got to take it with a grain of salt or whatever.
No, I mean, I just think it's an easy ska punk listen, good for any like summer day, even like it's not summer right now and I was enjoying it. Right.
Yeah.
But I guess that'll bring us to, as we kind of get into closing this episode, if you had to pick, I think I probably know your answer, but if you had to pick between The Knife or self-titled Goldfinger, which are you going with? That if you could only listen to one of these records ever, like no other Goldfinger, you had to get rid of the rest. Which one are you going with to keep?
So, me and my wife were in California this was for our anniversary in 2010. So after California had come out.
Whoa, slow down.
And
what year do you think California came out?
Sorry, not 2010, 2017.
Sure. Okay, that makes a little more sense.
Sorry, man. And so we were down there. The weather was, this was in the spring, or our spring. It was in April. And it was just way nicer there than expected. Anyways, this was an album that I'd only put a few albums on my phone to listen to, so I didn't have to use data, whatever.
Right.
And we listened to this album, driving. So we flew into San Francisco and then drove around a bit and to a few different cities. And we listened to this album, and just listening to this album while driving in California, just on vacation without the kids. The weather was way nicer than we thought. It just felt like a dream.
Right.
And,
it was perfect.
So this album, I got to go with. So sorry, you said between the Blink and the Goldfinger album?
No. Between
sorry,
the Knife and between self-titled Goldfinger.
Oh man,
It's earlier than normal. What the heck is wrong with you? Like, we've had time. So where you live, there's no time change. So I've now officially caught up on time, and so we're recording a whole hour earlier for you, and you are a mess.
Yeah, sorry. To be fair, I was researching grants all day, so my brain is a bit fried. But sorry, I thought you said the Blink album. Sorry,
no. I mean, we've been talking about
forget that whole rant. So yes, I do like that Blink 182 album. But
pause. So that whole thing was about Blink 182's California.
Yes.
Okay. Wipe that out. No, has nothing to do with this. The Knife or self-titled Goldfinger.
However, because the Knife reminds me a lot of that album in ways. I'm definitely going with the Knife. I mean, I've listened to that album so many times. I've got way more memories. Maybe I did have that album on that trip too. I don't know. Maybe it's all just blurring together.
That is a long, convoluted, backwards way to say that you picked the Knife. I think I'm gonna. Yeah, I'm also gonna go. No, I'm not also gonna go. What am I saying? I'm going with self-titled, purely because I have more memories tied to self-titled than I do to this record. But this record is a pleasure to listen to. Like, I'm not going to say it annoys me that, because people can like whatever they want, but I can put myself in the same category as other people and saying, like, initially I kind of wrote it off as like California sound-alikes, but I didn't go, oh, that means it sucks or anything like that. I just kind of went, yeah, okay, that's fine. It is what it is.
Right.
So to go back and listen to it, I definitely fully enjoyed it. But so I almost want to go back. I was thinking about our episode last week when we picked between 4 Year Strong and Set Your Goals, and I went with Set Your Goals. I'm reversing my decision. It has to be 4 years. Like, the more I listened to 4 Year Strong versus, I was like, no, it's got to be 4 Year Strong. So I've reversed my decision from last episode. So spoiler alert, if you didn't listen to it and now you want to go listen to it, you now know what I'm going to pick. But
so that happens with records. Sometimes you go back and forth. It's a favorite for now, and maybe that'll change.
Well, like, I haven't gone back and listened to Set Your Goals since last week, whereas Enemy of the World I have. So I'm like, clearly I enjoy Enemy of the World more. So anyways, and I think I did kind of say that and I talked myself out of it. But anyway, let's talk about what's up next, because we, as mentioned, we kind of planned a series of episodes, much like what we did with Newfound Glory into Easy Core. We've got a little something that we came up with this, and we've sort of talked about it throughout this whole episode, is that John Feldman has worked with a bunch of artists. So we thought, let's do 2 more episodes that are
Ashley Simpson and 5 Seconds of Summer.
Those are the ones. Talking about John Feldman related stuff. So next week, what we are going to do, I think we'll lay them all out. We're gonna lay out the next 2 episodes. Next week, we're gonna do the debut self-titled record from The Used, which, spoiler alert, is one of my all-time favorite records.
Yeah.
As well as Page Avenue by Story of the Year, which I think is a good fit because they kind of both fell into that similar, like, post-hardcore sort of thing and came out around the same time.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're going to do something a little bit different, but similar in a sense to this episode, in looking at something early and something more recent. We are going to talk about Wasting Time by Mest. And what was the other one?
Masquerade is their newest one.
No, we're not talking about that, though. That's not what we're talking about. State Champs.
Right.
I was like, what is it? I can't remember what the name of the record is, so I'm looking it up, unless you remember off the top of your head. Not that. Living Proof. So
Right, yeah.
So Feldman worked, obviously Messed, Wasting Time is a big one. I think that was the first one he kind of produced and worked on that wasn't Goldfinger. I think he might have done something with Real Big Fish early on.
Oh, okay.
But as
one
far
of the
as
bigger kind of pop punk bands.
yeah, and I mean Messed was like Goldfinger Jr., let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like even the lead singer of Messed at that time looked like he wanted to be John Feldman with the bleached blonde hair and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, next week it's The Used and Story of the Year, and then the following week we're going to do Messed and State Champs.
Yeah, awesome.
It should be fun. But that'll wrap it up for this episode. So again, go follow us on our social media, Twitter and Instagram at Growing Punk Pod. You can find all of our links there, including the brand new website and our personal Twitters and Instagrams, which you are now. You're still labeled as a butthead on our official Twitter, but you have Twitter. Your Twitter game is on fire.
I do, and I tweeted one thing, and now I don't know what else to do.
You tweeted a couple things, I think, like because I know you shared a video of you playing drums and there's different things. So you're now officially on Twitter. The peer pressure finally worked.
Yeah,
so
somebody add me so that
guy.
I know what to do with it.
There you go. Tell Aaron what to do. But wherever you're listening to the show, rate it, review it, subscribe, tell your friends. If you've been listening on YouTube, that's cool. I should give you this warning at the beginning of the show. That's cool. You can listen on YouTube, but if you want the full experience with music and stuff, go find us on your favorite podcast app. That should do it, though. So bye-bye.
Are you saying that I put an abnormal brain into a 7.5-foot long, 54-inch wide